A reliable babysitter is invaluable, as any parent will attest. Actually, it's good for everyone to get some fresh air every once in a while. It can be difficult if you don't have anyone close by to take care of your child on short notice. If that's the case, you'll likely need to find a reliable babysitter in the area, but how do you know who to pick? Claudia Sorhaindo faced this very predicament when she saw a picture of her daughter and froze. Claudia Sorhaindo raised her daughter Ava alone in Florida. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't always be with Ava because she had to work. Ava already had to attend preschool on a daily basis because of her mother's job, and then an email arrived about a mandatory out-of-town meeting. There was no way for her to solve the problem that she couldn't bring Ava with her. Claudia was caught between a rock and a hard place. She had been doing well as a single parent while working full-time until she was promoted and required to travel for business. For her to miss such a significant event as this one would be disastrous for her professional reputation. And with Ava's illness last week, she had already used up all her vacation time. That was her only option. It was time to reach out to loved ones, but she was realistic about their availability. She prayed that a reliable adult would be free this weekend to watch Ava. Unfortunately, Claudia's only hope was someone much younger than she was, and Lady Luck was not on her side. Ava spent the weekend with her Aunt Jan because that was what her sister suggested. Claudia's previous experience with a hired sitter had not gone well. It wasn't that her sister's daughter lacked experience, she'd watched plenty of kids before, but it's not the same when it's your kid, and she couldn't get rid of the sick feeling in her stomach whenever the thought crossed her mind. Although Claudia was very familiar with Jan, she had no idea how much the decision she was about to make would affect Jan's life. Claudia needed to make a decision quickly because time was running out before the trip. No one was willing to take responsibility for Ava, so a choice needed to be made. She could either miss the trip and risk losing her job, or she could entrust her precious daughter to her 15-year-old niece. She didn't realize it at the time, but her choice was one she would come to deeply regret. Jan showed up a little early, which is always a good sign, but it still wasn't enough to calm Claudia, as her mind played and replayed all of her unknown fears. As Jan was already familiar with the house, Claudia only had to brief her on the basics, such as the location of the baby food and instructions for making it, the diaper room and all its accessories, and the extensive list of emergency numbers that she had prepared. Calculations that would be pointless from her distance. Before she knew it, she was in a cab and on her way to the airport. Putting her phone into flight mode and cutting herself off from all news was the worst decision she had ever made. Though the flight time wasn't particularly long, Claudia still kept track of the minutes. She tried to focus on preparing for the meeting, but her mind kept drifting to her daughter and whether she was okay or not. As more hours passed, she got more anxious about her still lifeless phone. It was a full flight today, with passengers jostling each other to get their carry-ons the best possible place. Claudia, feeling a bit claustrophobic in the close quarters, unbuttoned her top button in order to get some fresh air. She felt her anxiety rising as she remembered Ava again in the crowded room and realized how helpless she was. Her only concern was discovering what Jan was up to at her house, so she hurried to get there. The plane was beginning its descent at last. As they prepared to land, she made sure her seat belt was securely fastened. She got a little more time off and was allowed to use her phone after being grounded again. She restarted the phone and watched the loading screen disappear before seeing a text message flash on the screen. It was a photo that Jan had sent hours after she had taken off. This tiny preview of what she saw sent chills down her spine. They got Ava's legs all wrong. To what had this come to? As Claudia opened the thumbnail to get a better look, she tried not to panic because her mind couldn't process what was happening to her baby in the picture. It was a shock to see her newborn looking so strange, almost contorted. She was desperate to know what Jan had written to explain the photo, so she punched the message into the screen. She needed to provide a lengthy justification. Claudia's mind was whirling with an obscene image, but the message didn't seem to match. There was no logic to the 15-year message. I think she mentioned she wanted to make a sandwich for herself. In order to prepare any meal, Ava would have to be left alone in the kitchen for a while, albeit only a few minutes. Claudia's overworked and frazzled brain unfortunately gave into instinct, and she dialed 911 on the speed dial. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the swelling in her daughter's legs. She'd also never seen the pants she was wearing before. It was as if her confused mind was unable to make sense of the situation. What caused her reaction? Did she have an allergy she didn't know about? Her thoughts whirled through the worst-case scenarios before she focused. She had made a terrible error. Jan was doing an excellent job as a babysitter. She had considered her auntie's overprotective nature and decided it wouldn't be appropriate to leave baby Ava alone for even a moment, so she came up with a plan. The resourceful teen had fashioned a kangaroo pouch out of a pair of stretchy pants, and now baby Ava could sit snugly next to her. The approach taken was unorthodox to say the least. Claudia's first instinct was to rush her child to the nearest hospital because she was too confused to determine the cause of the injury. She had falsely assumed that her daughter required immediate care. She only slowed down long enough after the fact to understand what was going on in front of the screen. After that, she lost her composure and cried openly. Her infectious hilarity caught the attention of passengers throughout the plane. The astute adolescent had figured out how to be the world's best babysitter while also making herself a sandwich. Claudia finally admitted that Jan was more than capable of caring for Ava by herself. One more guffaw escaped her lips, and a wave of relief washed over her. There was no doubt that her niece was the most creative caregiver ever. Claudia would see to it that Jan received the accolades she deserved. In order to share the delicious solution her niece had made in the kitchen, Claudia posted it on social media with the caption, "So, baby Ava needed to be watched, so I enlisted the help of my niece." I got a text later on that said Jan wanted to make a sandwich but didn't want to leave baby Ava alone for even a second. Creativity personified, if you will. Facebook had a quick response ready for them. Such a humorous photo was bound to go viral, but it's difficult to predict the reaction it will elicit. The babysitter's teenage helpers received widespread online praise for their originality. More importantly, Claudia had found a trustworthy and competent babysitter she could count on whenever she needed to be out of town. It was inundating to read all of the feedback on Facebook. One of the most common questions we got was where other moms and caregivers could buy those kangaroo pants. In comparison to an expensive baby carrier, this was a much more reasonable option. A thought was sparked by the nearly 300,000 likes and shares the photo received. There was talk of her starting her own business. Jan's goal is to fundraise for the materials to make her own pair of pants. Supportive aunt that she is, Claudia set up a GoFundMe page in the hopes of helping Jan get the ball rolling on her business plan. To finish up, all she needs is a viable business plan. Of course, now everyone wishes they had thought of it first. A Facebook user remarked, "Brilliant. Back in the 70s, I hip-carried my infants everywhere we went. I really wish I'd come up with that." Nonetheless, there are those who think the concept could have been developed further. Yet another commenter suggested, "You could make maternity pants that turn into this after. The idea deserves a patent." I can see money indeed, Jan feels the same way. Naturally, Claudia now strongly endorses both Jan's plan and Jan herself. She'll never forget how relieved she was when she finally understood what was going on in that perplexing image. Because she was so well cared for, Ava was never left alone for more than a few seconds at a time. As a result, Claudia has nothing but faith in her niece's abilities as a babysitter going forward. Here is an excerpt from what Claudia had to say about her niece Jan on the GoFundMe page. "My niece Jan is so excited to design a working model. Let's tell her, go ahead, use your imagination to come up with a great solution that will benefit caregivers everywhere." So far, $215 has been contributed to Jan's crowdfunding page, but many more people have pledged support. One contributor said, "I will donate on my payday next Thursday. Don't ever forget that, sweetie, you're a very bright and clever young lady."